Hey, how you doing, ma'am? I stay in, and my next door neighbor, she is like slumped over. Her front door is wide open.
Okay, you said
slumped over.
Okay, and you said that is this a house or an apartment?
Apartment. Come here, Bella. My dog was picking her out so she can walk around, and I seen she was running over to the door. So I said, "Come back over here, Bella." And I seen the next door neighbor. Her nose is bleeding. She unresponsive.
Okay.
She's just sitting on the couch, and her door is wide open.
Be able to meet with the officers?
I'm outside.
Okay.
Please send the ambulance.
Yeah. We're gonna go ahead and send officers and an ambulance out there as well. Does it look like she was maybe injured by someone, or does it look like she was maybe sick, or what does it look like to you?
I don't know. She ain't responsible. She got blood all on her face. I really don't know. I just want to make sure she's okay.
Okay, and is it just her in the apartment, or?
I don't see her son or nobody.
Okay, so it's just her in the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are you with her, or are you outside of the apartment?
And she is not moving, ma'am, and she looks purple. Oh, God.
Okay. All right, hang on one second. I'm going to transfer you over to the paramedics so they can give you instructions, okay?
Okay.
At about 11 p.m. on July 18, 2018, a woman called 911 to report that her neighbor was unresponsive. Now, she had not gone into the neighbor's apartment. She had taken her dog out for a walk and noticed the woman's front door was open. Right inside the door, 52-year-old Cynthia Stack was slumped over on a futon, with blood coming from her mouth and nose. When officers arrived on the scene, they determined that Cynthia was deceased, and they found her son, 22-year-old Sean Stack, in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor. He was also deceased. The mother and son had clearly been murdered, and it didn't take long for the authorities to discover the main suspects were a married couple who would lie through their teeth in order to get away with the crime. This is Monsters. After interviewing other neighbors, they learned that there had been gunshots at about 6:15 that morning, and then some neighbors heard a vehicle drive away, screeching the tires in the process. When the 911 caller was interviewed in more detail, she explained that when she came home from work at about 6 p.m. the day before, she saw Cynthia's door open and there was a man standing outside talking to the residents. She said the man seemed aggravated. She described him as being short, about 5 foot 5 inches or 165 centimeters, and about 170 pounds or 77 kilograms. She said he had dark hair, and she noted that he had both of his ears pierced. She also noticed a maroon Nissan Altima parked in front of Cynthia's apartment. She left between 8 and 9 p.m. to go back to work, and both the man and the car were still there. Then, when she came home from work again at 11 p.m., the man and the vehicle were still there. He seemed to be having a serious issue with Cynthia and her son, Sean. When the scene was examined, they noted that there was no damage to the front door. Nothing inside the apartment looked as though it had been disturbed. It didn't look like anybody had been searching for anything, and a number of valuables were still there. Investigators later learned that both Cynthia and Sean's cell phones were missing. A 9mm shell casing was found on the futon next to Cynthia's right arm. A fired bullet was found on the coffee table in front of the futon. There were multiple 9mm shell casings in the bathroom around Sean's body. There was a hole in the bathroom door, which looked as though Sean might have been in the bathroom and the killer fired a shot at him through the door. When investigators were finished at the scene, the bodies were transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsies. Those autopsies would show that Cynthia had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. The bullet entered the left side of her head just above her ear and exited through her right ear. There was stippling around the entry wound, showing that she had been shot at close range. Sean had been shot 3 times. once in the left shoulder, once in the left side of his face, and once in the head near his left ear. Both the gunshot wounds to his face and head showed stippling. It was likely that the shot to the shoulder was through the bathroom door. Detectives went to the home of Gerald Stack, Cynthia's father and Sean's grandfather. Gerald had suffered a brain injury and had memory problems, but he was able to give the investigators an important lead. During the interview, Gerald told the detectives that he used Chase Bank, where he had a personal banker named Amelia Bissoon. He explained that there had been some fraudulent activity on his account a few months prior. He said that he had wanted to give his grandson Sean $50,000 from his Chase Bank account, but somehow it had been given to Amelia. Then he handed them a copy of a notarized letter that he said he had been convinced to sign. It read, quote, "To whom it may concern, I, Gerald W. Stack, gave Amelia Bissoon permission to withdraw a total of 2 cashier's checks in the amount of $25,000 each from my savings account to the named Julian Hewitt for safekeeping and personal reasons. The funds are not to be repaid. I issued her my photo ID and signed 2 withdrawal slips. I was unable to come into the branch due to my illness. I am fully aware of the transaction that was made." The document had been signed by Gerald and notarized on May 17, 2018. Gerald mentioned that Cynthia had been looking into the transaction before she had been murdered. Detectives now had a puzzle on their hands. They needed to find Amelia and clear up what involvement she had with the Stack family, something that would not be as simple as it sounded. Amelia Bissoon was born on May 7, 1993. She was married to a man named Joshua Ramsawmy, who was born on April 8, 1990. The couple were both born in New York and had moved to Florida at some point. Josh had been in high school when he moved down to the Sunshine State, and it seems that he met Amelia there. She had been in a relationship with a man named Matthew Hewitt, which resulted in a son named Julian being born in the early 2010s. It's been reported that Matthew had physically assaulted Amelia and she had a restraining order against him. He was not involved in Julian's life, and Josh began seeing Amelia when the boy was still very young. The couple moved back to New York in 2016 but returned to the Orlando area a year later in June of 2017. Josh and Amelia got married in September of 2017, and at that time, Amelia was working as a personal banker at Chase Bank while Josh was working as a forklift mechanic. Then in December, Josh suffered an accident.
Long story short, I injured myself in December. I actually was putting my firearm away in the car, and I decided to land on a Zephyr Hills water bottle cap and go off in my leg. So I was when I moved back from New York last year,
right,
I was doing a forklift mechanic with my cousins.
Okay.
Then after that, everything just stopped. I was home doing therapy, and then she was like, start working again. I'm like, all right. And then she sent me the rec toward for Chase.
You like working for Chase?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah?
One of the best jobs I've ever had.
What do you do at Chase?
Card collections. Credit card
collections.
Oh,
boy.
Yeah. So I...
You get hung up on a lot?
Yes and no, but with our company, we have a lot of, I'd say options instead of going to, I guess a collections agency or debt consolidation. So Chase in itself has, different avenues, I'd say, to go ahead and help people in debt.
Okay.
Josh would later describe himself as always having a gun, and in 2017 it seems he accidentally shot himself in the leg. Something that only could have happened if he was handling the gun while it was loaded. A round was chambered and the safety was off. So that's a pretty telling introduction to Josh's intelligence level. The injury caused Josh to be out of work from December of 2017 until May of 2018. That was when he got a job at Chase Bank in their collections department. Before that, though, the couple were struggling for money, so they came up with a plan to steal some from one of Amelia's bank customers. Amelia knew that Gerald Stack had suffered a brain injury and not only had memory problems, but was easily influenced to do things he might not have done on his own, like allowing her to withdraw $50,000 from his savings account. Gerald had expressed a desire to give his grandson Sean $50,000, so Amelia seems to have convinced him that he shouldn't give the 22-year-old the money all at once. It's not clear exactly what she said to Gerald, but he would later say he believed that Amelia was opening a trust account in the name of his grandson. Investigators learned that on Thursday, March 29, 2018, while working as a personal banker at the Pine Hills branch of Chase Bank, Amelia approached bank teller Francesca Brachetti and asked her to draft a cashier's check in the amount of $50,000. Francesca noted Amelia was fidgety while she was talking to her. Amelia presented her with either 1 or 2 withdrawal slips for the transaction as well as 2 forms of identification. Due to the large amount of money, Francesca found Amelia's request to be out of the norm. As per bank policy, Francesca looked over at Amelia's desk to verify the person sitting there was the same person as the identification Amelia presented to her, but she was unable to. She also told Amelia she may need an override and someone else with more authority might have to assist with the transaction. Amelia was very pushy during the interaction with Francesca, who felt uncomfortable completing the transaction and told Amelia as much. When she realized Francesca would not do the transaction, Amelia grabbed the documents and left the teller line. On the same day, Amelia approached the branch manager Kendall Donawa and inquired about her override limits because she had a customer who wished to withdraw $50,000 from his account. Kendall advised Amelia her override limit was $25,000, to which she asked if she could separate the one withdrawal into 2 $25,000 withdrawals. Kendall advised her that was not the proper way to complete the transaction and offered to help because his override limit was $50,000. When they went to the teller line, Amelia told him the customer was in a rush and left the branch. Therefore, he did not complete the transaction. That afternoon, when the assistant manager returned from lunch, Amelia attempted to have her do an override for the $50,000 check. But since the customer wasn't there, she didn't end up completing the transaction. Records show that, a few hours later, Amelia drafted 2 $25,000 cashier's checks from Gerald's savings account and made them payable to Julian Hewick, her 7-year-old son. She left the bank branch at 4:40 p.m. with the checks and returned 8 minutes later without them. It's believed she gave them to Josh somewhere nearby. The following day, Gerald met with Amelia at the Pine Hills branch and opened an account for his grandson, Sean. At that time, Amelia transferred $10,000 from Gerald's savings account into the new account. Up until that point, Amelia had only dealt with Gerald and would only have access to his contact details. But once the account for Sean was opened, she would be able to get his home address where he lived with his mother, Cynthia. That detail would be important. Also on Friday, other tellers and the assistant manager talked to each other about Amelia's suspicious behavior the previous day. While Amelia was at work that day, Josh went to a Bank of America branch and opened a joint account in both his and Julian's names. He deposited both $25,000 cashier's checks into that account. On Monday, April 2nd, Amelia told a coworker that her computer was offline and asked if she could use hers. That coworker was busy with a customer, so she agreed and went back to what she was doing. Amelia did not log into her profile and used the coworker's profile to add a note to Gerald's account that read, quote, "Customer does transactions on the account and forgets what he does. He comes into the branch the day after confused and then he remembers. Please be cautious." When the branch manager, Kendall, saw the note and learned that Amelia had made it using a coworker's profile, he became suspicious. That same day, Josh went to the Bank of America and withdrew $3,500 in cash. On April 4th, Kendall reported Amelia to J.P. Morgan Chase Global Security and Investigations, and she began being investigated for her actions between March 29th and April 2nd. While Amelia was taking heat at work, Josh continued to withdraw thousands of dollars from the Bank of America account. $8,500 on April 7th, $3,000 on April 13th, $5,000 on April 19th, and then another $5,000 on April 30th. On April 23rd, $2,300 was deposited into Amelia's Chase bank account using an ATM, and then $3,000 was deposited into a different ATM on the 30th. When Amelia met with an investigator from Global Security and Investigations, she told him that Gerald had requested the 2 cashier's checks, but he hadn't been feeling well, so he waited in the car while she processed them. It was Chase Bank policy to only process transactions while the customer was at their teller window, and Amelia admitted that she had not followed proper procedure. She explained that she had a good working relationship with Gerald and was trying to help him out. The investigator's report said that a manager had spoken to Gerald and confirmed that he had requested the checks, so Amelia was written up for not following proper banking rules and the case was closed. The exact manager who spoke to Gerald was not listed in the report, though. It is known that Amelia had contacted Gerald during the investigation and had asked him to lie and say he was in the car while she processed the checks, and he seemed to comply, though it's likely due to his brain injury. When Amelia was later interviewed by the police regarding the murder of Cynthia, she gave them a much more watered-down version of what happened with the 2 $25,000 checks.
So what happened with these checks?
Nothing. She called him. I have the record over Global Security.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came in, they pulled like call logs, they pulled like cameras, just to make sure like they pulled signature files. Because, I mean, it's still federal, it's the bank. So they wanted to make sure that I wasn't, like, I guess, stealing.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to, like, do this whole, like, track record of contact him, make sure that, like, he did give me permission to go ahead and pull this money out of the account, to write these 2 checks out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. I mean, that happened since March. That was...
When you talk to Gerald, I mean, how did he appear to you? Is he a young guy, old guy?
He's old.
Oh, how did he appear to you when you talked to him?
He's okay.
He was okay?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any issues when you talked to him about remembering things or anything like that?
No, he told me he had brain... Like, I know, like, a little about himself. Like, he had brain surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, he remembers things. I don't think he forgets, really. He's a little frantic sometimes, because he gets, like... I don't know, like, it's just frantic. That's it. Like, when he talks to me, he always brings up, like, stories about, like, his kids and, I don't know, like, traumatic things that happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. I mean, that's really the only time I see him, like, ever, like, frantic. But other than that, he's so nice.
Okay. Yeah, nice guy. But so he didn't seem like he was ever confused or forgot things or anything like that?
I mean, sometimes to other bankers, too. He actually has a note on his account that, like, he does stuff and then he forgets.
She talked about the note on Gerald's account as if she hadn't been the one who had made it. She described it like other people had noticed memory issues with Gerald, so they made the note. But Amelia played it as if she never noticed his memory issues. Some might ask why she even made the note in the first place, and I think it was so people would not believe him if he showed up at the bank saying he hadn't authorized the checks. They would just be like, "Okay, old man, whatever you say," and shrug it off. She did it under someone else's bank login so she could deny the knowledge of him being compromised mentally.
So he had you draw these 2 checks?
Yeah.
Okay. How much were they worth?
$25,000 each.
Okay. What did he have you do? Like, what did he ask for?
Nothing, it's just we put 2 checks and $25,000 each, and that was it. The grandson came, picked him up, and...
The grandson came and picked him up?
Mm-hmm.
What's the grandson's name?
Ooh, I don't remember. I opened up his account for him, like, the day after.
When did he come in and pick them up?
Either the day after or the same day, I don't remember.
Okay.
Because it was either the day before or the day after, I opened up an account for him. I don't know if it was the same day or not, but I did open up his account for the grandson.
Oh, so he must have just deposited those checks into the account?
I'm guessing.
Okay. So he took so you're thinking that he took the 2 $25,000s and deposited them in that check?
No, he didn't put in his account because I transferred money over into his account from his grandpa.
Okay.
So that was Amelia's first story. She claimed that Gerald had asked for 2 cashier's checks, each in the amount of $25,000, and that his grandson Sean came in either that day or the following day and picked them up. Without hesitation, she said that those checks went into the hands of Sean. Of course, the story quickly broke down.
When he came in to get the cashier's checks, who were they made out to? The grandson?
No, they were made out to my son, Julian Hewitt.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, when I had talked to Mr. Stack, he didn't want his grandson to have full funds right away. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like an agreement that me and him made. Mm-hmm. He didn't want his grandson to have the funds right away. So he said that if we can keep the funds and just keep it safe for him, that was it. So I put them in my son's name.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you put them in a Chase Bank account?
Mm-mm.
Where did you put them?
My husband took them.
And what did he do with them?
I guess he opened an account with them.
Where?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is an agreement that, like, me and Mr. Stack.
And what were you supposed to do with the checks?
Keep them until he told me his grandson needed them,
So, and you can look at the timestamp on the interview recording, but less than a minute before, she confidently told the detective that Sean had picked up the checks. Then, with no explanation or attempt to feign forgetfulness, she said that her husband Josh picked them up. Not only that, but he deposited them into an account at a different bank and she didn't know which one. Now, that already sounds abso-fucking-lutely ridiculous, but even more so, she claimed it was an agreement she made with Gerald to keep the funds safe until he decided to give them to Sean. Why would she have Josh put the funds into a bank account where she couldn't access them? It made no sense. And you're probably wondering why he wouldn't have just left the money in his savings account. Well, so was the detective.
I guess my question is, why wouldn't you just leave the funds in the bank?
He didn't want them to be in there. He told me that he wanted to put money aside. He said put $50,000 aside.
So, but again, I guess I get confused because didn't you tell me the grandson came in and picked up the checks the next day? Mm-hmm. So did he come in and pick up the checks the next day?
No.
All right, so we're lost.
Yeah, I gave them to my husband.
Okay, so that whole thing is not true?
No, so the grandson didn't come pick them up.
Okay.
I gave them to my husband, but the grandson did come in to open up an account the next day.
That's fine, but again, I guess I'm just lost as to why would you say the grandson came to pick him up?
Well, because that's kind of what I told work as far as like the grandson came to pick the checks
But
up.
that's not true.
No, but I had to tell that for work because I can get fired. I don't want to get fired.
You didn't want to get fired?
No.
Then why did you do it?
Because this was what he wanted me to do. I'm a good friend of his. He gave me permission.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of good friends. I have plenty of people that I'm friends with, but I'm not going to get fired for them. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get fired at work, so that's why. Okay. It's kind of what I had to deal with.
So you lied at work?
To keep my job, yes.
Okay.
So Amelia was such good friends with Gerald that she was willing to risk her job to keep $50,000 of his money safe, despite it being perfectly safe and we'll soon find out even safer where it was in his savings account. On May 16th, the day after Amelia was interviewed by the investigator, Josh went into the Bank of America and closed the account he had opened. There was only $25,000 remaining in the account, which he received in the form of a cashier's check. The couple had spent $25,000 in 7 weeks. The following day, Josh cashed the check at an Amscot, which is a check cashing place where he paid $1,225 in fees for the service. It's unclear why Josh didn't just get the Bank of America balance in cash when he closed the account. At that point, Amelia seemed to believe she needed to get herself some insurance and wrote a document to have Gerald sign. She had asked a notary who worked at one of the Chase Bank branches to come with her to Gerald's house when she had him sign it, but that person knew that Amelia had been under investigation and she didn't want to be involved. So Amelia hired a notary named Deborah Romano and told her she had an elderly client who needed to sign a document at his home and it needed to be notarized. Deborah met both Josh and Amelia at Gerald's house and she went with Josh into the house while Amelia waited in the car. The notary told investigators that Josh never read the document to Gerald. He just explained that it was needed to withdraw funds from his account. She watched Gerald sign 2 copies, one for him and one for Amelia, and the notary stamped them. When Amelia was asked about the document by detectives, her story did not match Deborah's.
So the notary you went with, who wrote the document that...
I typed the document.
You typed it up?
Yes.
With Gerald there?
Yes, he was there.
When you typed the document?
No. I typed the document.
So the words that are typed on there were your words?
Yes, because I typed the document.
Did you do that at his request?
No.
You did it on your own?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess this is I get confused. You said the money was not to be the document says the money is not to be repaid.
Reissued or repaid. So I went over the document with him in front of the notary at the time to make sure that he understands everything in the document that's going on.
No, she didn't. She was in the car and Deborah stated that the document was not read to Gerald.
Well, I guess if I read that, would that be exactly the same thing that you suggested to him before?
In a sense, no.
No. Well, not in a sense. I mean, that's flat out
no.
not. Right. Okay, so why did you put that in there?
Only because of kind of the situation that I'm in right now. I don't want to make it look like or make it seem like...
Well, again, okay, well, I mean, again, this is where I get lost. If the agreement was for safekeeping, which is, I believe you said it was in there, okay, then why put in there, safekeeping means you're going to give it back, because that's what you told them, then why put not to be repaid?
Well, I mean, just in case I use the funds, which is kind of what I did, so...
So she went from, I gave the checks to Sean, to I kept them for safekeeping, and now she's making Gerald sign a document agreeing the money doesn't have to be repaid in case she spends it. Why would he have you take money out of his savings account and hold it if there was a chance you were going to spend it? It makes no sense.
I believe you told Detective Mareshi when the bank came to talk to you the first time, you said you hadn't spent any money yet. Okay, so the bank talked to you when?
In May?
May, okay. And you hadn't spent any of the money?
Not that I know of, no.
What do you mean, not that you know?
Not I remember, not that I remember, no.
Is it possible?
I don't know if Josh made any withdrawals because remember, I don't have any access to the funds. It's him.
That's another lie because she had thousands of dollars transferred into her personal banking account at the end of April. Then there were the purchases. They had paid bills and bought new appliances for their house. They were about to go on a cruise, but Amelia claimed that she paid for that on her own. I don't believe her. They spent $25,000 in less than 2 months. Much of it is unaccounted for. They definitely seemed like the type of people who would steal money to blow on luxury items like a cruise. From the middle of May until the beginning of July, Josh and Amelia might have believed they were in the clear. Josh had started working in the collection department for Chase Bank, and there had been more than a month where nobody was asking any questions about the checks. On July 9th, Gerald's daughter Cynthia called a different Chase Bank branch and spoke with a man named Kenneth Wilson. She explained that there was money missing from her father's account and she believed Amelia was involved. Kenneth spoke to Gerald, who explained he had a brain injury and that he was confused about which accounts he had. He thought he had a trust account with $50,000 in it for his grandson, but he couldn't locate that account. Upon further review, Kenneth also failed to find the trust account. Gerald, Cynthia, and Sean all went into a Chase Bank on the 12th and reviewed all of the transactions from his account. Gerald was able to explain them all except for the 2 $25,000 cashier's checks that had been issued on March 29th. He suggested that they had funded the trust, but the personal banker they were with, Marcelo Fontes, could not find any trust in either Gerald or Sean's name. Marcelo called Amelia and gave the phone to Cynthia. He would later tell investigators that he heard Cynthia ask Amelia to close the account and put the funds back in Gerald's account. While the Stacks were with Marcelo, Amelia was texting another employee at the branch telling her that she heard Cynthia was a crackhead and her dealing with Gerald's account was suspicious, clearly trying to throw suspicion off herself. Over the next few days, Cynthia tried to talk to Amelia but wasn't successful. Investigators found a 26-minute call on the 13th, but for days after, she tried to get in touch with Amelia with no success. During that time, Amelia sent text messages to Josh saying she was scared. Then Amelia met with a longtime friend named Jay Prasad and confessed to having taken the money from Gerald. According to Jay, she wanted him to help her find someone to scare Cynthia into not reporting Amelia to the police. After Jay complained of back pain, Josh offered to give him the rest of the pain pills he had from when he had shot himself. Then he gave Jay $1,000 so whoever he found to scare Cynthia knew they were serious, but Jay never held up his end of the bargain. He later told investigators he just wanted the cash. On the evening of July 16th, Josh went to a pawn shop in Winter Garden and purchased a Taurus G2C 9mm handgun. Late into the night, Amelia tried to reach Jay with no response. The following day, she sent a text message to Jay that read, quote, "No response, no reply. I just can't believe you would do this to me." It was at that point that Josh and Amelia believed they were out of options. Amelia was able to get Cynthia and Sean's address from Sean's bank account, and Josh arrived there on the evening of July 17th, and it sounds like he spent hours trying to talk them out of taking legal action against them. Those talks likely didn't go in Josh's favor, so he returned in the early morning hours of July 18th and killed them. Search warrants for Josh and Amelia's house as well as their cell phones were obtained on July 23rd. By then, investigators had taken a picture of Josh to Cynthia's neighbor, and she confirmed it was the man she had seen at the apartment the day before the murder. Investigators also learned that Josh owned a maroon 2015 Nissan Altima, which matched the vehicle that had been parked nearby. The computer forensics department had found multiple searches for Amelia Bissoon and Julian Hewick on a laptop that had been recovered from the crime scene. The searches had been made in the later hours of July 17th. It was clear that Cynthia was compiling information and was not going to stop trying to find out what happened to her father's money. Josh and Amelia were arrested and brought into the police station for questioning on the 26th. The detectives spoke to Amelia first and initially focused on the money. It was clearly the catalyst for the murder. After weaving through Amelia's complex web of lies, they finally got a clearer picture of how the theft happened, but they needed to know exactly how that led to murder. When they went in to talk to Josh, it would be even more difficult to get the truth.
Do you want a firearm?
I did. I actually bought one last week, Monday. And that was a big argument between me and Amelia. For me, I've always had a gun. I've had a Smith & Wesson. Always had a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And then after this whole situation, of course, Orange County had the gun. So I was like, we had a thunderstorm. I think it was like Sunday. And I was like, we saw a car pull up in the yard, or I did. And I was like, I don't know who it is. I put the light on, the car drove away. So I'm like, okay, fine. And I was like, things are getting a little crazy where we live. We need some type of protection in the house. And then she started bitching at me, and I'm like, oh my God. She was like, oh, what if that happens to you? What if you kill yourself again or injure yourself again? And I'm like, we got into an argument, and I was like, fuck it. I was like, all right. And then I left the house. She was all bitching at me, this, that, and the third. I'm like, okay, I went back with my parents. And then, where did I go? Got into an argument. I know I ended up at Alchemy Hookah Lounge around like 11:30 that night. That was on Tuesday. I took a drive to Daytona, and I actually chucked the fucking gun over the damn bridge. I was like, fuck it. And she was like, what the hell did you do?
Okay, which bridge in Daytona did you throw the gun off of?
On International, was it International Speedway or Parkway?
Did you pull over?
No, I was actually parked. I walked. I was just trying to clear my head, and I was just had like a relapse of what happened on my leg, and I was like, fuck this, and I just threw the gun.
What time is that at?
Probably like 3 o'clock in the morning. 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Josh's story was that he just happened to buy a gun, same caliber as the murders, 2 days before the murders, and then, the morning of the murders, he drove an hour to Daytona and threw it off a bridge into the water. Not only that, but he had his cell phone turned off while he did it. Now, if you want to not look completely guilty, this is not the story you should tell detectives. Obviously, the detectives had questions.
Then you went to Daytona, and you took this gun, and you threw it off the overpass?
Yeah.
Was it all in one piece?
Yeah. All in one piece.
What caliber is that gun?
I think it was a 9mm.
What kind of ammunition did you put in it?
I didn't have any ammunition inside of it.
You didn't have any ammunition inside of it?
No.
Did you buy ammunition for it when you bought it?
No.
Okay. Well, I just get a little confused. So, explain to me your reasoning again as to why you threw this gun off this pier.
I had a real, I guess a relapse of what happened to me. And I was like, some shit happens again by accident. Fuck my life up again.
But it's not loaded?
Yeah, it wasn't loaded.
Okay.
It went into water?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was on a bridge over water, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the bridge right before you get to the Daytona Beach.
Yeah, you get off like, what is it, 75 on International, or 80, what is it?
95.
95. By the Speedway there, and just keep going, and
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
I guess that's where I get a little concerned. Well, my thing is, you guys are kind of hurting for money, sounds like. I mean, you're working now, but
I'm working now, so things are...
you spent $250 in cash on this gun.
Yeah.
It's a pawn shop.
Mm-hmm.
Pawn shops are pretty good. I mean, usually you can go back and pawn it back, right?
I was like, at that very moment, I was like, anything could fucking happen, and I'm like...
But it's not loaded.
It wasn't loaded, yeah.
So right down, you got basically a paperweight.
Yeah.
It's like he wanted to explain why he didn't have a gun anymore, and he thought this would be a satisfactory story. He claimed that he had driven to Daytona at about 3 in the morning on the 18th, which would make him not able to have committed the murders. But there's no solid evidence that he had done that. He had been seen at Cynthia's apartment the night before the murders, and the detectives clearly weren't buying his story of throwing the gun off of a bridge. So he changed his tune and involved Amelia paying to have Cynthia and Sean killed. Josh admitted to having been at Cynthia's apartment, but according to him, someone came and took his gun away.
I didn't throw the gun away.
Okay, tell me.
I left there at maybe 10 something. But before I left, the same guy that Amelia paid him. He messaged me on Snapchat, oh, there's $9,000, $10,000 more. And I was like, maybe he's trying, at first I thought it was maybe he's trying to sell drugs or something to get the money back. Simple. And the same guy came up to my car. He said, what are you doing? I said, I wanted to talk to her to get the money back. And he's like, oh, Amelia, or Jay sent me here. I'm like, sent you here for what? And he was like, he had a gun to my head. And he said, he said, I know you have a gun. Give me your gun and leave. I left. I went to Alchemy. Didn't throw the gun over the pier. He had the gun. I went back to Alchemy. I drove to Daytona. Came back home at like 5:30 in the morning. And that was it.
Josh, why did you put a gun in your head and take your gun?
I don't know. All I know is Amelia paid them $10,000.
To put a gun to your head and take your gun?
I don't know why she paid them. I don't even know why.
Well, before you said you thought they paid him to shut her up, is what you told me.
Yeah, that's
so now you're saying you don't know.
That could have been.
So why would they have? Okay, so why would they have to come to you, right?
I don't know. I guess they
put a gun to your head and take your gun.
Figured they weren't like. They figured that I wasn't gonna be there or go talk to her or something.
That was the beginning of Josh and Amelia turning on each other. From that point on, Josh continued to push the narrative that Amelia had paid Jay $10,000 to quote-unquote take care of Cynthia and Sean. At the same time, Amelia told detectives that Josh was the one who had been texting Jay, but he had taken her phone to do it. When they asked her how Josh got Cynthia's address, believing she gave it to him, she claimed that Josh must have gotten it off of her phone. Why Cynthia's address would have been in her phone is unknown. She would have needed to get it from Sean's bank account. When the detectives told Amelia that Josh was throwing her under the bus, she changed her story once again.
He told me what he went to do. He told me what he did. So I know.
Okay, so let's talk about that, okay? And thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I know that's not an easy thing to do.
So I started to tell him about the phone calls that were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he started to get more nervous for himself because I had already gotten in trouble at work. So
Mm-hmm.
my situation was done and over with.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he just started to get more nervous for himself because all of the things were in his name. The paper trail, everything money-wise, everything was in his.
Okay, I understand that, yeah.
It was in his name. So, as I was talking to her, I guess he just started to get more and more upset at the fact that she was continuously calling me and that I was providing her information as well, which he was getting upset about too. So he told me that he was going to, quote-unquote, handle the situation, and those were his exact words.
Okay.
I'm going to handle the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me if I were to get involved, and if I were to say anything, that he will kill me. He'll kill my mom and dad, and he'll kill myself.
Okay.
So when I came home, he was cleaning it, and cleaning bullets, and putting them into the gun.
What do you mean cleaning?
He was cleaning bullets with, like, alcohol or something.
Okay. What was he doing with the gun? You said he was cleaning the gun,
Mm-hmm.
too? What was he doing with the gun?
He was cleaning it with, like, cotton swabs and cotton balls.
Was it apart or together?
It was apart.
Apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
And then I left around like 1:30, almost 2, to go head back to work for lunch. And he said he's going to handle the situation. Is basically what he said. And I just went to work as normal. I didn't contact him. I didn't talk to him. I just saw him the next morning, and he took off all his clothes. He put it in a clear garbage bag. I know he took the gun and he, like, I don't know what he did with it, but he grinded it down with something.
The whole thing, or just like a part of it? Or?
I know it's in, like, pieces.
And where is it now?
I don't know. He told me that he was, like, cutting the barrel. I don't know these terms. I'm just saying what he told me. Mm-hmm. Cut the barrel, and he grind the gun down.
When did he tell you that?
A couple of days ago.
Why did he tell you that a couple days ago?
Because I asked him, what are you doing? Because the sound is loud. And
so he was out there doing that a couple days ago.
And I'm in the house, so I'm like, what are you doing at this time of the night? Like, what are you possibly doing?
Were your parents home?
My parents are home, but because our house is so far apart, it's kind of like difficult to hear what's going on one side of the house.
So as soon as he got home, he took his clothes off and put them in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And what did he do with his clothes?
He put it in a clear garbage bag, and he went by his mom and dad's house.
And what did he tell you he did over there?
He told me he handled the situation, and he told me that I cannot call them, don't contact with them, don't do nothing, just leave it be.
Okay.
Amelia's final story was that Josh had told her that he was going to quote-unquote take care of it. Afterward, he disposed of his clothes and cut the gun into pieces. At that point, detectives were sure that Josh had killed Cynthia and Sean, and they believed they knew why. They just needed to clear up a few things with Josh. When they returned to the interview room with Josh, he said that he believed the pills and money they had given to Jay would be for him to invest in more drugs to sell to make back the money they had spent. Then they could return the money to Gerald. When it was clear the detectives didn't buy that story, Josh went all in on throwing Amelia under the bus.
That night, Amelia came back in the house and said, Jay wants to talk to you. She said Jay has people to go ahead and take care of the situation. They wanted $25,000. She told him we didn't have $25,000, so we paid them $1,000. He said he needs some material or something, and from that, the next day he said, I need more. We paid him, I think it was supposed to be $4,000, but we forgot we took out the $1,000 from a $3,000 band. So So that was 4,000. Then the next day we gave him 6,000.
With the understanding that he was going to do what?
Kill these people.
Kill them.
Correct.
Okay. And when was he supposed to kill them?
At their house.
When?
They didn't give me. He didn't give me a day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is this a direct conversation you had with Jay, or is this what she's telling you that Jay said?
This is a direct conversation we both had with him.
Okay, you were both. And where was that conversation?
On Snapchat.
Okay. All right. So you and her are having this conversation over Snapchat with him.
About killing somebody?
She said to take care of it.
On Snapchat.
Josh said that Jay was paid to kill Cynthia and Sean, but that meant his actions after that made no sense. I know, there are no shortage of things that don't make sense with either of these people's stories.
What happens on Sunday?
Nothing.
What happens on Monday?
Nothing.
Tuesday?
Nothing. Didn't hear back. Well, Monday, that's when the lady called her again.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, nothing happened. And I said, okay. She said, do you need to come home now? I left work. I came home. And she said, I tried getting in contact with Jay. He didn't answer. And then I talked to him, and I was like, nothing happened. He said, yeah, they took the money. I feel bad because my money, I feel like shit because my money's involved with it too. And then after that, he said, it'll get handled or something like that. And I left it alone.
Why do you set this thing in motion with all, we're getting to the point, okay, you've now paid somebody a fairly substantial amount of money to kill somebody or to take care of somebody, and then on Wednesday you go expose yourself to these people. And like I said, I have no doubt.
Do you understand what he's saying?
Yeah, you go over there and you're like making yourself known. People see you. They obviously identified you. You spend a great deal of time. And you know what, Josh? I have no doubt. The one thing that we could tell for sure is that when you went over there that afternoon, it wasn't to kill him because you were there for too long. It's in the middle of the day. People are going to see you.
Yeah,
so if you've already set in motion this plan to have this thing taken care of, why would you go over there and do that? That defies common sense. And you're not you know what? If nothing, you and your wife, you're not idiots. You did a pretty good job of covering your tracks. But that just defies. Did he take your money and run with it? Is that what you thought at that point? Because nothing had happened.
I don't know.
And that was the investigators' theory. They thought they had hired someone to kill Cynthia and Sean, but after days went by and they hadn't been killed, Josh decided to do it himself. Josh had claimed he had gone to Cynthia's apartment on the evening before the murders to talk to her about giving the money back. But why would he do that if he had paid someone to kill them? More questions arose when Josh said that Amelia and his sister Rachel Ramsawmy had been driving around looking for him and also went to Cynthia's apartment.
Why was Amelia worried about you and looking for you?
She didn't know where I was.
Why would she drive by that apartment complex if she didn't know where you were?
I told her. She had an idea that I was going to go there because I was trying to make things right.
What did you tell her?
About the whole because that was a conversation we had.
Tell me about it.
Was, hey, can we go ahead and... I told her.
Mm-hmm.
And...
This is after you paid these people to take care of her.
Correct.
Why would you be worried about paying her back the money when you already paid these people $10,000 to kill her?
Because to me, it's like one or the other. You either start... we hate to laugh, but it's like it's been going on all day between you and your wife.
Tell me why. Why would you go over there and try and talk to her? Why would you talk to Amelia about paying her back?
Because they're two innocent people.
Okay, did you make any efforts to call Jay and tell him not to do it and we want the money back and we're going to go pay her?
No,
No, why not? Why?
I don't know.
You don't know? That's the best answer you have? I don't know?
All I know is I went there.
No, it's not all you know. Stop saying that. Amelia knew exactly why you were there. Amelia knew exactly where to look for you. Pretty funny, don't you think? The fact of the matter is your phone is off. Why? Because you went there. Because if it was so innocent in the first place, you would have told us about it. But you didn't.
Said Amelia knew where to go look for you, and there's a reason why they were asking where your gun was. Jesus Christ, even your sister's asking about this. Your own sister. Why the fuck would they ask you where your gun is if you were completely and totally, no?
Amelia thought he was at Cynthia's apartment because she knew he was planning to kill her and Sean. It was that simple. When Rachel was interviewed, she told investigators that Amelia had called her on July 17th at between 8 and 9 p.m. She said that she and Josh had a fight and asked Rachel to come over. Once Rachel arrived, they both took Rachel's car out to look for Josh. Rachel said she called Josh, but it seemed that his phone was turned off. Then Amelia asked Rachel to turn her phone off while they looked for Josh. Rachel initially questioned her, asking how Josh would call her back if her phone was off, but Amelia was adamant, so Rachel acquiesced. She said that she noticed that Amelia's phone was also turned off. The first place Amelia directed Rachel was towards Cynthia's apartment. They didn't see Josh's car at the apartment complex, so they left and got something to eat. Then they returned to Amelia's house, where Rachel dropped her off and left. Rachel told the investigators that Josh later told her that he had thrown the gun off a bridge in Daytona. Josh stuck to the story that he went to Cynthia's apartment to talk to her about the money, that before he left a man put a gun to his head and took his gun, then he went to a nightclub, drove to Daytona, and then drove home. Amelia ended up taking a plea deal to testify against Josh in exchange for having murder charges against her dropped. While she was out on bond, the drama didn't stop though. She began cheating on Josh with a couple of different guys, and when one of them got jealous on April 29, 2021, he picked her up. In the car, Amelia got angry and began hitting the driver before calling 911 and reporting that she had been kidnapped. The police showed up and placed both of them under arrest. There's a video of the body cam available online, but it's just more drama.
Like, that's why I fought back.
Okay, and no offense,
No, of
and this
course.
isn't going to change anything whatsoever.
No, of course.
I asked you multiple times if you ever did anything to him, and every single time you said you didn't.
No, well, I told you when we were in the car.
Right, you said in the car you started
Yes,
bumping around, and you started kicking the car, you started hitting the doors.
Yes,
you
to get out.
never said you started hitting him. I asked you multiple times,
did, yes,
and you said you didn't.
No, because I told
And
you
I go talk to him. He has bruising and scratches and everything all right here on the side of his head. Hold on. Right, I get that part. So he's got bruising and cuts and stuff like this all along here.
Yeah.
He also has extensive bruising and stuff like that on his chest.
Of course.
Of course, Amelia is caught not telling the truth yet again. It was like a flashback to her interrogation video. She begged the officer to not take her to jail since it would likely result in her bond being revoked, but it didn't work. Amelia is the type of person who will never take responsibility for her own actions, and unfortunately her sentence for her previous crime was probably not severe enough to change that. It's not clear how that situation was resolved as the previous charges overshadowed it. On July 29, 2021, Amelia Bissoon pleaded guilty to felony theft and identity theft and was sentenced to 3 years in prison plus 15 years of probation. She was released from prison on December 26, 2003. With her testimony, Josh Ramsawmy was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. I couldn't find any information on what happened to the remaining money that the couple had stolen. It doesn't sound like the police recovered it. Could Amelia have used some of it to pay her bond? It's definitely possible, but that's only speculation. Chase Bank returned $50,000 to Gerald Stack's account and apologized for the theft. Josh and Amelia believed that they deserved money they hadn't worked for. They believed they could take advantage of a man because he had compromised mental faculties. Then when his family began asking questions, they believed they deserved to get away with their crime. They believed that desire was more important than the lives of 2 people. Amelia may not have been charged with the murders, but I believe she knew. That's my opinion, and it makes both of them monsters. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.